We got a little cat fight between Glenn Beck and Oprah Winfrey. Now, this is not about the handbags, thankfully, because I'm sick of talking about that. No, this is going back to Trayvon Martin. Glenn Beck is not having it. Oprah Winfrey recently, in some way, implied that there was a connection or an analogy to be made between Trayvon Martin and Emmitt Till, and Glenn Beck is not happy with it. Let's watch.
Oprah Winfrey, you disgust me. As a woman who has gone through hell and back and made it and pulled yourself out by the bootstraps, you made it. You made it. You grew up with hate from your own race. You grew up with rape in your own race, and you pulled yourself out. And the American people, both black and white, yellow and red, it doesn't matter the color, they saw you make it. They saw you overcome everything that you had faced, and we celebrated that. So much so you're the most famous and most accomplished black woman in the history of America. You have your own network because we celebrated that you made it. You disgust me. Why are you telling everybody else they can't make it? Why are you telling us that white people are the problem?
To his credit, Glenn Beck is doing the best that he can to hide his racism in that clip, but it still comes through. And so we're going to focus on a couple of things that he said there. I love that he says, you grew up with hate from your own race. You grew up with rape in your own race. And certainly that is not untrue, I suppose. But I love that all of the hate towards Oprah Winfrey during her slow rise to the top only came from African Americans. There was no white opposition whatsoever. And so the idea that he can hide the fact that white Americans took a long time to accept Oprah Winfrey, or that there's a significant portion of white America who still does not support her, I think that's comical. And so I love the basic message here, if we can really drill down to what he's saying, is we allowed you to succeed. We did not stop you from becoming rich and famous. And so how dare you betray us by actually doing something in your mind to increase the status of black Americans, to get through some of the racial strife that we have right now. How dare you? We allowed you to get rich, and now you owe us, and so how dare you say anything about the problems of African Americans? And that's obviously ridiculous. I don't have a long list of quotes from Glenn Beck on Oprah Winfrey in the past. Perhaps you can look them up and post them in the comments. I have a feeling he has not been her biggest fan over the past few decades. But the idea that the only problem for her during her rise to the top was black American views of her, that's fucking ridiculous. And the idea that simply because an African American can succeed in America, because you can point to one example of success, the idea that clearly now there is no racism is also ridiculous. He says, why are you telling everyone else they can't make it? Why are you telling us that white people are the problem? First of all, in saying that Trayvon Martin died because he is African American, first of all, seems relatively true to me. I have to imagine that if he was a white teenager, George Zimmerman would not have felt as threatened by him, would not have followed him, and would not have gotten in the conflict with him. That does not say that you can't succeed in America. It's just saying that if you are African American, you are going up against a different set of obstacles than other Americans. And you don't need to listen to Oprah Winfrey to say that. You don't need to look at the case of Trayvon Martin to see that. That's obviously true. Yes, Barack Obama is half black and he managed to become the president. Yes, Oprah Winfrey is African American and became rich. But that does not mean that for the vast, vast majority of black Americans, there are not major obstacles to success, starting from a very young age all the way up into your career eventually. And so I don't entirely know what's causing this little catfight. I don't know why Glenn Beck felt the need to attack her there. But even those Americans on the right who are not themselves strongly racist, who don't, drop the N-word like Paula Deen and do not personally advocate for policies that would harm black Americans, and personally I think that Glenn Beck is a part of that group, but even if he wasn't, there seems to be this very strong impulse to deny that it exists, because I think even if you are not a racist, you live in fear of being called one. And as a conservative, I'm sure Glenn Beck feels that fear quite often. Because even if they're not racist, their views of blacks are probably hardly understanding, I suppose. And so I have to assume that that's what's causing his little rift with Oprah Winfrey there. I expect that she is unlikely to respond to it, although she does have that movie coming out, and so perhaps she wants the publicity. But anyway, whether you agree with her comparison between Trayvon Martin and Emmitt Till, it is ridiculous to assume that she suffered no racism from white Americans in her rise to the top, or that her rise does not implies that African Americans now have it easy. I think that even Glenn Beck realizes that that's ridiculous.